My parents gave my brother a multi-million-dollar yacht and left me a rusty, deserted shipyard. Enjoy your new pond. My name is Arthur Vance, and for as long as I can remember, I've existed in the shadow of my older brother, Julian. He was the golden child, the one with the dazzling smile and a silver tongue that could charm the paint off a battleship. I was the quiet one, the one who preferred the solitude of a greasy engine room to glittering social events. While Julian chased fleeting, grandiose ventures that always seemed to fizzle out, I spent my life with my hands dirty, mastering the intricate dance of marine engineering. I could coax life back into a dead diesel, understand the subtle language of a hull under stress, and design systems that hummed with efficiency. I was good at it, damn good, but to my parents, Richard and Eleanor, I was just Arthur. Dinner invitations from my parents were rare and never without an agenda. Usually, it was a subtle or not-so-subtle reminder of my perceived shortcomings, a comparison to Julian's latest, highly exaggerated success. But this time, a sliver of foolish hope, stubborn and persistent, nestled in my gut. Maybe, just maybe, this was different. Maybe they'd finally see me, truly see the man I'd become. I walked into their opulent waterfront estate, the air thick with the scent of expensive wine and the clatter of silverware. Julian was already there, holding court, a glass of amber liquid swirling in his hand, his laughter echoing a little too loudly. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, sat at the head of the long mahogany table, radiating an almost regal satisfaction. Aunts, uncles, and a few distant cousins I barely recognized dotted the rest of the seats, all fixated on Julian's endless anecdotes. "Arthur, you made it," Eleanor chirped, a little too brightly, without meeting my gaze. Julian was just telling us about his latest venture. Absolutely brilliant. I nodded, pulling out a chair at the far end of the table. Glad to hear it. Richard cleared his throat, tapping a fork against his crystal glass. The room quieted, attention shifting from Julian to him. "As you all know," he began, his voice booming with self-importance, "Eleanor and I have decided it's time to begin dividing our assets, ensuring the future prosperity of our legacy." He paused for dramatic effect, glancing at Julian, who practically vibrated with anticipation. "Julian, my boy," Richard continued, his voice softening with paternal pride, "your vision, your entrepreneurial spirit, it reminds me so much of myself. To that end, we're gifting you the Siren's Call." A gasp rippled through the room. Julian's eyes, usually calculating, widened with genuine shock and delight. "The Siren's Call?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "The new super yacht? The one in Monaco?" Eleanor beamed. "Yes, darling. It's yours. A symbol of your boundless potential." Julian practically choked on his wine, then recovered, pumping a fist in the air with a triumphant whoop. Everyone clapped, exclaiming over the grandeur of the gift. I sat there, not tightening in my stomach. What about me? There had to be something, right? A small token, a gesture of equal consideration? Richard turned his gaze to me, then, his expression flat, almost dismissive. "And you, Arthur," he said, as if it were an afterthought. "We're giving you the old Vance Shipyard." Silence. I blinked, my mind struggling to process the words. "The what?" Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "The one on the old industrial waterfront, dear. It's land, after all. You're so good with your hands, you'll figure something out." Julian burst out laughing, a high, mocking sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh my God, Dad, you're serious? The decrepit old ghost yard? Arthur, at least you'll have plenty of room to practice welding on rust." He doubled over, tears streaming down his face. "Enjoy your new pond, little brother. Maybe you can start a fish farm." My parents chuckled along, shaking their heads. Richard added, "It's been empty for decades, Arthur. But hey, you always talked about building things. Now's your chance." My throat felt like sandpaper. This wasn't tough love. This was a punch to the gut, delivered with a smile. My mind flashed back to when I was 16, proudly showing them my first paycheck from the docks, my hands raw and calloused from overhauling ancient tugboat engines. Julian, meanwhile, was whining about wanting a brand new sports car. Richard had barely looked up from his newspaper, muttering, "You'll always smell of diesel, won't you, Arthur?" Eleanor had just sighed. At least he's useful. Maybe one day he'll fix Julian's toys for free. And here we were, all these years later, and nothing had truly changed. I took a slow, deliberate breath, pushing back from the table. "You're serious?" Richard shrugged, a faint smirk on his lips. "You should be grateful, Arthur. We're giving you anything." Julian snickered. "Yeah, maybe one day you'll make enough money to buy a real dock, not just a ruin." Their laughter filled the room, a symphony of casual cruelty. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the edge of the chair, but I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just nodded, a cold resolve settling deep within my bones. "Okay." Eleanor frowned, confused by my lack of outburst. "That's it? No, thank you." I stood up, my gaze sweeping over them all, settling finally on Julian. "Oh, I'll make something of it." And when I do, I paused, letting my words hang in the air, sharp and unyielding. "Don't come knocking." Julian rolled his eyes. "Sure, Arthur. Can't wait to see what you do with a pile of scrap metal." Richard shook his head, muttering, "Always so dramatic." I walked out without another word, the echoes of their laughter chasing me into the night. Fine. They thought they could humiliate me. I'd turn that worthless, rusted-out shipyard into something they'd never see coming. And when I did, they'd regret every single word. The morning after that excruciating dinner, I stood before the Vance shipyard, the morning mist clinging to the skeletal remains of forgotten cranes and the crumbling facades of derelict warehouses. It wasn't just a sick joke, it was a monument to their contempt. Cracked concrete, weeds sprouting through every fissure, rusted signs swaying precariously in the salty breeze. This was the gift my parents had bestowed upon me while Julian sailed off on his multi-million-dollar dream. They wanted me to fail, to drown in the rust and the history of neglect. Fine. I make sure they choked on their own words. I didn't waste a single moment. Within days, I had contacted engineers, environmental consultants, and local authorities. The permits alone were a nightmare, a bureaucratic labyrinth designed to deter anyone without infinite patience or endless funds. But I was Arthur Vance, the guy who could fix anything, and that included red tape. I needed capital, serious capital, more than my life savings could cover. Traditional banks scoffed, seeing only risk where I saw potential. So, I turned to someone who understood the true meaning of a rebuild, Captain Elias Thorne. Elias was an old salt, a retired freighter captain with a reputation as solid as an icebreaker. I'd done some emergency engine work for him years ago, pulling off a miracle that saved his ship and his livelihood. He believed in hard work, in the gleam of polished brass and the hum of a well-maintained engine. He listened patiently as I laid out my vision. Not just a repair yard, but a state-of-the-art facility for bespoke yacht construction and high-end refits, specializing in classic restoration and advanced marine tech. He didn't just give me a loan. He became my first true believer, a quiet mentor who offered advice born of a lifetime at sea. With Elias's backing, the transformation began. Weeks bled into months of relentless, back-breaking work. I was on site from dawn until dusk, often longer, covered in grease, grime, and the dust of demolition. I hired a small, dedicated crew, old-timers from the original shipyard who'd watched it decay with heartbreak, and ambitious young apprentices fresh out of marine tech schools, eager to learn. We cleared decades of debris, shored up crumbling docks, restored rusted cranes, and installed cutting-edge equipment. The very air changed, from the stench of decay to the sharp, clean scent of fresh-cut metal and sea air. Slowly, painstakingly, the Vance shipyard began to hum with a new kind of life. We rebranded it, Vance Marine Solutions. Our first projects were smaller, high-profile classic boat restorations. A pre-war wooden sloop that looked destined for the scrapyard emerged gleaming, its teak decks shimmering, its engine purring like a contented cat. A sleek, vintage speedboat, thought long lost, was brought back to its former glory, complete with modern navigation systems discreetly integrated. Word spread through the niche maritime community like wildfire. Yachtsmen, collectors, and even a few superyacht owners started whispering about the miracle happening at the Old Vance Shipyard. Our social media channels, initially just documenting the grim realities of renovation, exploded with awe-inspiring before and after videos. About 6 months in, just as the buzz began to reach a crescendo, I looked up from overseeing the installation of a new dry dock system to see a familiar, perfectly coiffed figure stepping gingerly over a steel beam. It was my mother, Eleanor, dressed in an expensive designer suit, her nose slightly wrinkled at the faint scent of welding fumes. "Arthur," she said, her voice dripping with forced pleasantness, "so this is what you've been doing. It's quite dirty, isn't it?" She looked around at the bustling activity, the sheer scale of the operation, but her eyes glazed over with a practiced disinterest. "Are you sure this is a sensible use of your time? Julian, is networking with billionaires in St. Bart's right now. Real business." I didn't even bother to stop the welders. "Mom," I said, wiping my hands on a rag, "I'm building something real here, not chasing paper dreams." She exhaled sharply, clearly unimpressed. "It just seems so much effort for rusty old boats. It's just a phase, right? You'll want to get back to something respectable soon." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. A phase that's building a reputation that Julian's networking could only dream of. Her face twitched, as if on cue. A gleaming white super yacht, the siren's call, glided past the mouth of the bay, its horn letting out a long, arrogant blast. Julian. A few days later, Julian himself showed up, stepping off a luxury tender and onto my newly reinforced dock, a smug look plastered on his face. He surveyed the buzzing activity, the massive yachts in various states of repair, the skilled technicians moving with purpose. His usual smirk faltered. "What on earth, Arthur?" he snapped, gesturing vaguely. "You've turned this into some kind of industrial park? It's messing with my property values." I raised an eyebrow. "It's called a successful business, Julian. Something you might not be familiar with." He scoffed. "This isn't real money. This is just grease and grime. You're a mechanic, Arthur, not a CEO." "Funny," I countered, gesturing around the yard where dozens of high-value vessels were being worked on. "Then why are hundreds of people spending their fake money here every day, trusting me with their multi-million-dollar investments?" A couple of my foremen, overhearing, actually clapped. Julian's face turned a mottled red. "Mom," he whined, turning to her. She had apparently trailed him, always a shadow. "Tell him this isn't fair." Eleanor cleared her throat, adjusting her designer scarf. "Arthur, dear, we're just concerned. This doesn't seem stable. Where's the elegance?" I leaned against a newly restored mast, arms crossed. "Stable? Like the fully furnished super yacht you handed Julian for free, Mom? The one he's probably already trying to leverage for his next brilliant idea?" Julian cut in quickly, his voice rising. "You can't sell this, Arthur. This is family property. You're polluting the area." I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh, now it's family property? That's funny. When you were all laughing at me, I don't remember hearing family in the conversation. You dumped it on me as a joke, a burden. That wasn't betrayal." Julian's jaw clenched. "I'm just saying, turning it into this is a betrayal of the Vance name." I slowly turned to face him, my voice dangerously calm. "Are you seriously saying that to me?" His confidence wavered just slightly. "When you wished for my failure, when you mocked my efforts, was that not betrayal? When you celebrated my humiliation, was that family?" Eleanor looked like she was searching frantically for something to say, a polite platitude to smooth things over. Finally, she managed, "Well, Arthur, if this business is doing so well, maybe we should discuss a partnership? For the family's sake." I stared at her, then I laughed. Loud. So loud a few of my workers turned to see what was happening. "You're kidding, right?" I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. "You ignored me, humiliated me, gave me nothing but a rusting graveyard, and now that I've resurrected it, you want a piece? A partnership?" Julian crossed his arms. "It's family money now, Arthur. Vance money." I took a step forward, looking him dead in the eye. "You already got your share, Julian. Your multi-million-dollar yacht. Live with it." Then, without another word, I turned my back on them and walked straight back into the heart of my booming business, leaving them standing there like statues, marooned on my dock. They thought they could break me, but I was just getting started. The Shipyard, now a thriving hub of maritime innovation, seemed to hum with a newfound energy. Vance Marine Solutions wasn't just a local success, it was garnering international attention. We were building custom yachts that redefined luxury, restoring classics with an almost religious reverence, and pioneering new propulsion systems that were light years ahead of the competition. Arthur Vance, the overlooked mechanic, was now a recognized name in the global marine industry, sought after by discerning clients from Monaco to Dubai. While my fortunes soared, Julian's, predictably, began to sink. Whispers turned into open rumors about his financial woes. The Siren's Call, once a regular sight in glittering Mediterranean ports, was spotted less and less, eventually becoming a semi-permanent fixture in a dreary, industrial dock. His ventures, once touted as groundbreaking, were revealed to be shaky at best, elaborate Ponzi schemes built on promises and leveraged parental assets. A massive real estate development deal Julian was involved in, supposedly a sure thing, collapsed, leaving behind a trail of angry investors and staggering losses. Richard and Eleanor, having poured a significant portion of their wealth into Julian's increasingly desperate schemes and co-signed countless loans, felt the pinch acutely. Their lavish lifestyle, once seemingly effortless, began to show cracks. The private jet was grounded, the annual European Grand Tour was canceled, and the household staff thinned out. The first desperate call came from Eleanor. Her voice, usually composed and slightly aloof, was strained, edged with a tremor I'd never heard before. She started by asking about my business, feigning interest, then subtly, clumsily, tried to fish for information about my profitability, about investment opportunities. I kept my answers vague, professional, offering no more than polite generalities. A few days later, Julian showed up at the shipyard again. This time, he didn't arrive on a luxury tender. He drove a modest rental car, and his usual swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. He was dressed down, his expensive watch the only remnant of his former ostentation. He awkwardly asked to borrow a substantial sum, enough to tide him over, claiming it was a temporary setback, and he'd pay me back tenfold once his next big deal materialized. I remembered every empty promise from our childhood, every loan he'd never repaid. I simply shook my head. Julian, my business is about reinvestment, not charity. I'm not a bank. He turned purple with rage, but there was a helplessness in his eyes I'd never seen before. Then came the main event. A few days later, Eleanor and Richard appeared at the shipyard. They looked years older, their faces etched with stress. Richard, the usually stoic patriarch, looked utterly defeated, his shoulders slumped. They cornered me in my office, the hum of the yard outside a stark contrast to the stifling silence within. "Arthur," Eleanor began, her voice barely a whisper, "we're in serious trouble." Richard cleared his throat, his voice raspy. "Our primary investments, the ones tied to Julian's projects, they've collapsed. We're facing significant financial ruin." He carefully avoided mentioning Julian's name, blaming the market and unforeseen global circumstances. I listened, my expression unreadable. Years of neglect, of being treated like a disposable afterthought, flashed through my mind. All the times I had needed them, for emotional support, for a simple belief in my capabilities, and all I got were dismissive chuckles and comparisons to Julian. "Oh," I said, feigning surprise. "You mean the family that handed my brother a multi-million-dollar yacht and laughed while giving me a rusting graveyard is struggling? Who could have possibly seen that coming?" Eleanor's nostrils flared, a flash of her old imperiousness. "Don't be childish, Arthur. This is serious." I tilted my head. Childish? Like laughing in someone's face when they're at their lowest? Like wishing them failure while showering another with endless gifts? Richard groaned. "We don't need a lecture, son. We need a loan. A substantial one." There it was. The golden moment. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my chin thoughtfully. "How much?" Eleanor swallowed hard, her eyes pleading. $5 million. To save a house. Everything. I actually laughed out loud, a bitter, mirthless sound. 5 million? No way. Richard nodded, looking utterly exhausted. You're successful now, Arthur. You can afford it. I crossed my arms. Oh, so now I'm successful? Now my dirty hobby is worth something to you? Eleanor snapped. Don't be a brat, Arthur. We are your family. I let that hang in the air for a long moment. Then I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. Let me tell you something about family. Family doesn't mock you when you're struggling. Family doesn't treat you like a joke. And family doesn't show up only when they need something from you after years of disdain. Eleanor's face turned pale. Richard muttered, Arthur, please. I exhaled slowly and shook my head. You made your choices. You chose to back Julian to enable his reckless lifestyle, to put all your eggs in his entitled basket. And I gestured around my thriving office, the hum of the shipyard a powerful testament to my efforts. I made mine. I built this. This, I said, slamming my palm gently on my desk, is my empire, and I'm not giving you a cent. Eleanor gasped, her voice trembling. You ungrateful. I held up a hand. No, we're done. I turned to go. Arthur, Richard called out, his voice cracking. If you walk away from this. I paused, turning back. If I walk away, I repeated, my eyes locking onto his. You mean like you walked away from me for 30 years? Silence. Then I simply nodded. That's what I thought. And I left them standing there, the weight of their choices pressing down on them. My revenge wasn't just saying no. It was making damn sure they watched me win. And I wasn't done yet. I thought I had made myself crystal clear. No money, no help, no second chances. But people like my parents and Julian, they don't take no for an answer, especially when it's delivered by someone they've always considered beneath them. Sure enough, a few days later, they came back swinging, hitting below the belt as always. It started small. My phone buzzed with notifications, a flurry of one-star reviews for Vance Marine Solutions. This place is a rip-off, shoddy work, and an arrogant owner. Avoid, read one. Another, terrible service, smells like old fish, and the owner is a selfish, ungrateful person who doesn't care about family. I chuckled. Nice try, Mom. Eleanor always had this insidious habit of playing the victim first, throwing you under the bus, then acting like the injured party. I could practically picture her in her perfectly appointed kitchen, furiously typing out fake reviews between sips of overpriced tea, Julian cheering her on. But they didn't stop there. A few days later, a city inspector showed up at the shipyard. Anonymous complaint, he muttered, looking almost embarrassed. Someone reported that your permits for the new dry dock might not be up to code, and some vague accusations about environmental violations. I raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, I said, a well-dressed woman and her perpetually disappointed son? The inspector scratched his head. Can't say who filed it, sir, but something tells me you've got a pretty good idea. I knew exactly who it was. And then another complaint came in, this time about my seating area, allegedly violating public access requirements. Then one about noise levels at night. Then another, more serious one, about improper waste disposal. They were trying to bury me in legal red tape, drown me in fines, suffocate my business before it could grow any bigger. But here's the thing about me. I'm not that easy to break. Instead of panicking, I fought back. I hired the best maritime lawyer in the city. Every permit, every license, every single regulation was checked, rechecked, and locked down so tight that even the city inspector, after a thorough review, admitted there was nothing amiss. I doubled down on my marketing. If they wanted to ruin my reputation, I drowned them out with overwhelming positivity. I started running special weekend events, boat shows, marine tech expos, live music performances on the dock. I reached out to local influencers and even international yachting magazines, inviting them for VIP tours and tasting nights. My social media exploded with authentic, positive engagement, and I expanded. If they thought I was a problem before, they had no idea what was coming. I acquired the adjacent vacant lot, transforming it into an outdoor exhibition space for new models and a high-end marine equipment showcase. I partnered with local artists to set up weekend craft markets, drawing in even more diverse crowds. Their petty sabotage attempts, instead of harming me, became free publicity, amplifying my reach and boosting my business even further. Then Julian made the biggest mistake of his life. It was a Saturday night, the busiest night of the week. The air at Vance Marine Solutions was electric, buzzing with the energy of hundreds of visitors. The scent of gourmet food trucks mingled with the clean tang of salt water. Live jazz drifted across the glittering water, and lines stretched out the gate. The entire place was packed. That's when I heard it, a slurred, shouting voice near the main entrance. "This place is a joke, a monument to greed." I turned. It was Julian. He was visibly drunk, his usually immaculate hair a mess, his expensive designer clothes wrinkled and stained. His face was blotchy, his eyes bloodshot, like he'd been crying in his car before staggering in. Eleanor was right behind him, gripping his arm, her own face a mask of mortification. "Julian, stop this. This isn't." Julian ripped his arm away from her. "I can't believe you think you're better than us. Arthur," he screamed, his voice carrying over the music. "Look at you. You're just a glorified dockhand playing CEO, a glorified mechanic." A few customers turned, pulling out their phones. Perfect, I thought. I walked toward him, keeping my voice calm, but with an edge of steel. "Julian, leave." He stumbled closer, his breath reeking of alcohol. "You think you're a big shot now, huh? You think you're better than us?" I smirked. "I don't have to think it, Julian. I just am." His face twisted with drunken rage. "You're nothing. You're absolutely nothing." And then, splash. I didn't even see it coming. He had grabbed a full glass of champagne off a random customer's table and, with a wild, uncoordinated swing, threw it directly at me. A wave of cold, sticky liquid hit my chest. The entire yard went dead silent. For a second, you could hear a pin drop. Then, two of my burly security guards, already on high alert, tackled him to the ground. The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers. Eleanor shrieked, "Let him go. He's your brother." I brushed the soaked champagne from my shirt, the chill spreading through me. I turned to my head of security. "Call the police. Charges for assault and vandalism." Julian's eyes widened in horror. "What? No. Arthur, don't." I crouched down, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "Actions have consequences, Julian. You taught me that." 10 minutes later, blue and red lights flashed across the bustling shipyard. Eleanor was hysterical, clutching her chest. "You're ruining the family name," she shrieked. I just laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Lady, you did that all on your own." Julian was put in the back of the patrol car, sobbing, begging, looking just like I did all those years ago when they humiliated me. But unlike them, I didn't care. Eleanor turned to me, her voice shaking with rage and despair. "This is your brother. Do something." I crossed my arms. "Oh, you mean like how you did something when you gave me nothing and laughed in my face? Like how you stood by and watched him tear me down?" She had no answer for that. I turned, walking back toward my customers, who were already resuming their revelry, the incident fading into the background. "Oh," I called over my shoulder, just loud enough for Eleanor to hear, hope a siren's call was worth it. And then I went back to my thriving business. They wanted to watch me fail. Now, they had front row seats to my success. After Julian's drunken meltdown, his arrest, and the humiliating public spectacle, I genuinely thought they'd finally get the message. I was wrong. A week later, Eleanor and Richard showed up at Vance Marine Solutions again. This time, there was no smugness, no condescending laughter. They looked desperate, defeated, like shadows of their former selves. I was in the middle of a meeting with my lead yacht designer, discussing the specs for a new, groundbreaking, eco-friendly vessel, when I spotted them hovering near the main entrance. Awkward, out of place, utterly lost amidst the organized chaos of my booming enterprise. For years, I had been the one feeling small around them, never enough, never worthy of their praise. Now, the tables had turned. I was the one in control. I let them wait. I finished my meeting, shook hands with my designer, and then, slowly, deliberately walked over to them, my arms crossed. "You're back," I said, keeping my tone casual, almost bored. "Let me guess. Julian sent you because he's too embarrassed to face me after his little performance? Richard cleared his throat, his gaze darting around the bustling shipyard, as if seeking an escape. We need to talk, Arthur. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, like the talk we had when you laughed in my face and handed me a piece of garbage while giving Julian a multi-million-dollar yacht? That kind of talk. Eleanor pursed her lips, a flicker of her old indignation surfacing, quickly extinguished by desperation. This isn't about the past, Arthur. I chuckled a low, dry sound. Oh, it's all about the past. Because if you hadn't treated me like dirt, if you hadn't consistently tried to undermine me, you wouldn't be standing here begging me for help. Eleanor's eye twitched, but she forced a calm, almost placating expression onto her face. We're in trouble, Arthur. Deep trouble. I already knew. Julian had maxed out every credit card trying to keep up appearances, his business ventures, nothing more than elaborate fronts for his endless debt. The siren's call had been seized by creditors, and Julian's reckless leveraging had dragged down not only his own assets, but also significant portions of my parents' portfolio. Their once unassailable family fortune was hemorrhaging money. The economy had taken a nosedive, and Richard's old guard investment firm, relying on outdated strategies, was bleeding cash. His trusted business partners had bailed, leaving him exposed. They were sinking, and whether they liked it or not, I was their only lifeline. Richard exhaled, looking utterly broken. Arthur, we're family. Family helps each other. I burst out laughing, genuine, unburdened laugh this time. That's rich. You didn't care at all about family when you screw me over, did you? When you wish for my failure. When you built Julian up on my crushed spirit. Now that you're broke, suddenly it's about family? Eleanor stiffened, her voice rising in a desperate plea. You have more than enough to help us. Why are you being so spiteful? I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. Spiteful? Oh no, Mom. Spiteful would be me buying your house just to kick you out onto the street. Their eyes widened. Richard's face paled. You wouldn't. His voice was barely a croak. I smirked. Wouldn't I? Because here's the thing. I have been waiting for this moment. After Julian's meltdown, after your petty sabotage attempts, I knew you'd come crawling. So I made a backup plan. While you were busy drowning in debt, I had been discreetly expanding, acquiring more property around the waterfront. And guess what? Your house. Your ancestral home. The one you always said would be Julian's because he was the legacy. The bank listed it for sale last month, quietly, to cover some of Julian's initial, smaller debts. And I bought it. Eleanor's face went bone white. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You're lying. I pulled out my phone, scrolled, and held up the email confirmation. Arthur Vance. New property purchase confirmed. Address and details listed clear as day. Richard's hand shook. You bought our house? He choked, utterly devastated. I tilted my head. You mean the house you told me wasn't my home anymore? The one where you let Julian treat me like garbage while you celebrated his every indulgence. Eleanor grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. Please, Arthur. We'll do anything. Just don't take our home. Tears streamed down her face, a raw, desperate fear I had never witnessed. I pulled my arm away. Now you understand what it feels like, don't you? To have something you cherish, something you felt entitled to, ripped away. She started crying harder, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity. Just a cold, hard sense of inevitability. And then, the final blow. I looked between them, taking a deep breath. You know what? I said, slowly, deliberately. I'm not heartless. I'll give you the house. Eleanor gasped, her eyes wide with a fragile hope. You will. Richard let out a shaky breath of relief. I smirked. Sure. On one condition. They both nodded frantically, their faces a mixture of desperation and fleeting hope. Anything. Eleanor choked out. I took out a pen and a meticulously prepared contract from my pocket. I'll let you live in it. But my company, Vance Marine Solutions, owns it, and you'll pay me rent. Every single month. No delays. At market rate. Eleanor's jaw dropped. Arthur, you can't be serious. Charging us to live in our own home. I leaned in. Oh, I'm deadly serious. You're not living in your home, Mom. You're living in my home now. Silence. Richard swallowed hard, his eyes hollow. We don't have a choice, do we? I shrugged. Of course you do. There are plenty of cheap motels in town. Or maybe Julian has a spare berth on one of his ventures. Eleanor glared at me, her face contorted in a mask of pure humiliation, but she knew she had lost. Slowly, with trembling hands, Richard took the pen and signed the contract. Eleanor snatched the pen, digging it into the paper so hard I thought she'd tear through it. When they finished, I took the contract, folded it neatly, and slid it into my pocket. Pleasure doing business with you, I said, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. I turned, leaving them standing there, two broken figures. Richard slumped against the wall, rubbing his temples, the weight of their choices crushing him. Eleanor wiped her tears, her face a mask of bitter, defeated pride. They had spent their entire lives belittling me, laughing at me, treating me like I was nothing. Now I own their home. I own their future. I own them. As I walked back into the bustling heart of Vance Marine Solutions, the sounds of industry a powerful symphony, I smiled. They thought I'd be nothing. Now, I owned everything that mattered to them, and they had nothing left to take. But as I looked out over the gleaming yachts, the busy dry docks, the true empire I had forged from their scorn, a strange emptiness lingered. Justice had been served, yes, but the gaping hole where family should have been, that remained, leaving the audience to ponder the true cost of such a victory.